From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon, I'm Emma Albert, and these are your news headlines for noon. Trudeau is expected to make an announcement on electric vehicle infrastructure during his visit to Victoria today. The federal budget from last week showed a heavy emphasis on moving towards a green economy. This included new investments in critical minerals and metals, as well as expanding the availability of zero-emission vehicles and charging stations. Trudeau spoke about the importance of these investments while visiting Victoria.
These solutions we develop in Canada will be an essential part of how we move forward. And that's why we're there to invest in a range of pathways so that we can make sure we're not just protecting the planet, but we're creating a strong and growing economy for years to come.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh made comments as well regarding the federal budget, stating that the Liberals have not done enough to get the NDP on board with it. Singh is in Burnaby today speaking with various groups on local issues. A BC scientist is calling for better public access to COVID-19 data. The independent BC COVID-19 modeling group stated in their latest report that they believe BC is starting its second wave of the Omicron variant. And as we enter this sixth wave of the pandemic in the province, UBC professor Sarah Otto, also a member of the modeling group, says the data that has been made public in BC lags behind other Canadian jurisdictions and isn't sufficient enough for analysis. Otto also stated the severity of the next wave remains unclear due to the unreliable public data. More on COVID-19 news. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the sixth wave will be challenging for Canada's public health system. During his visit today in Victoria, Trudeau made the remarks ahead of his meeting with the city's mayor.
We know that the possible sixth wave we're on the verge of, that's hitting in some parts of the country already with this new variant of Omicron, is going to be another challenge for us to go through, challenge for our frontline health workers to go through. We need to make sure we're there to support them at the same time as we try and allow Canadians to get back to the things they love.
Trudeau's meeting with Victoria's mayor later today is expected to be met with anti-mask protests. A woman was airlifted to hospital after a police-described domestic incident in Abbotsford. The victim was airlifted yesterday morning with serious injuries. A spokesperson for the Abbotsford Police Constable Paul Walker says officers were called just after 10:45 for reports of a woman in distress. Walker says police believe there is no risk to the public and the parties involved in the incident knew each other. A decision has been postponed in the case of a Regina doctor accused of sexually assaulting 5 female patients. Justice Brian Sherman was to give his verdict on April 22nd, and it has now been moved to May 18th. Sylvester Ukebom, who was 76, is accused of assaulting the women between 2010 and 2017, allegedly during medical exams he did as a gastroenterologist, which is a doctor who deals with disorders of the stomach and intestines. Manitoba's Finance Minister Cameron Phrasin met today with members of Manitoba's Ukrainian community. The community was presented with shoeboxes filled with items for those fleeing the war in Ukraine. Phrasin says Manitoba is preparing for the arrival of thousands of refugees from that country. He says the budget shoe tradition provides another opportunity to stand with Ukraine. The Alberta government says it has ended its relationship with 3 Russian regions over the invasion of Ukraine. Premier Jason Kelly has written letters to the governors of the regions denouncing what he calls, quote, appalling war crimes. Alberta had promoted economic and cultural cooperation with the area since the 90s, but the province says it is the first time it has terminated a relationship with a sister region. U.S. President Joe Biden and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi are speaking virtually as the U.S. pushes India and others to take a harder line against Russia's invasion of Ukraine. India's neutral stance in the war has raised concerns in Washington and has earned praise from Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Modi says through an interpreter that he has spoken several times with both Russian and Ukrainian leaders.
I not only appealed for peace, but also suggested that there be direct talks between President Putin and the President of Ukraine.
India continues to purchase Russian energy supplies despite pressure from Western countries to avoid buying Russian oil and gas. A Minnesota judge will hear arguments Monday on whether to allow live video coverage of the upcoming trial of 3 former Minneapolis police officers who were charged in the murder of George Floyd. Judge James Cahill allowed it for ex-officer Derek Chauvin's trial last year. He made an exception to Minnesota's normal rules, citing the need to balance safety and the COVID-19 pandemic against a public trial. Now Cahill must decide whether to allow the same sort of access for the trial set to begin in June for 3 other former officers who are charged with aiding and abetting murder and manslaughter. Twitter's largest investor, billionaire Elon Musk, won't join the social media company's board after all. Julie Walker from the Associated Press has more.
The news from Twitter's CEO comes less than a week after Musk was awarded a seat on the board, and it follows a weekend of Musk tweeting suggestions to change Twitter, including making the site ad-free. Nearly 90% of Twitter's revenue from last year came from ads. Musk, it was revealed last week, had quickly amassed a massive stake in Twitter to become its largest shareholder. Its CEO didn't offer an explanation for the reversal, but said the decision was made by the Tesla founder. I'm Julie Walker.
French President Emmanuel Macron says he wants to convince a broad range of French voters to back his centrist vision, kicking off a 2-week battle against right-wing challenger Marine Le Pen. Charles de Ledesma from the Associated Press has more.
The French election outcome will have wide international influence as Europe struggles to contain the havoc wreaked by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Macron has strongly backed EU sanctions on Russia, while Le Pen has worried about their impact on French living standards. Another key point of difference, Macron's a firm supporter of NATO and of close collaboration among the EU's 27 members, while Le Pen has dropped earlier threats to pull France out of the EU and abandon the shared euro currency if elected, but some of her proposals, including setting up a national border control, are contrary to EU rules. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
Throwing it over to sports news, North Vancouver's Kent Johnson signed his first NHL contract with the Columbus Blue Jackets over the weekend. The signing comes after Johnson's Michigan State Wolverines were knocked out of the NCAA Frozen Four semifinals last week. Johnson was drafted 5th overall by Columbus in the 2021 NHL entry draft and looks to be making his pro debut Wednesday against the Montreal Canadiens. Hockey fans around the world got their first major taste of Johnson's game this season at the shortened World Junior Hockey Championship, and more recently at the Beijing Olympics. We now go live to our producer, James Parisi. So, James, when can Canucks fans expect to see Kent Johnson play here in Vancouver?
Thanks, Emma. So unfortunately, there aren't any games between Columbus and Vancouver left in this season's schedule, so that will have to wait until next season. But fans wanting to get to know Johnson better can tune into this summer's rescheduled World Junior Hockey Championship. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you, James. The Montreal Canadiens are going head-to-head against the Winnipeg Jets tonight. This is the second out of 2 games for the teams, with the Jets winning the previous showdown. The Habs are coming off a 3-2 loss against the Maple Leafs Saturday in Toronto. Montreal may have a leg up tonight, though, as it's the Jets' second game in a row after playing on Sunday. The Toronto Blue Jays start their first road trip of the season tonight, facing the New York Yankees in a 4-game series. Toronto won their first series of the season, taking 2 of 3 games against the Texas Rangers at Rogers Center. The Yankees also won their first season of 2022, taking 2 of 3 games from the visiting Boston Red Sox. Friday's home opener was the Blue Jays' first in Toronto since 2019, with the COVID-19 pandemic forcing them to play most of the past 2 seasons in Dunedin, FLA, and Buffalo, New York. Teoscar Hernandez had a 3-run homer and scored the winning run in the home opener as the Blue Jays came back from a 7-run deficit to beat Texas 10-8. Pinch hitter Santiago Espinal hit the go-ahead RBI double in Saturday's 4-3 win over the Rangers. Taking a look at weather, we are still sitting at 3 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud throughout the day. While later the temperature will be an average of 12 degrees, it won't stay that way for long. We're looking at overnight showers tonight and possibilities of thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon. Those were your headlines to noon. I'm Emma Albert, and you're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
Hey there!
Welcome to Companion Call. I'm Tiger Ann.
And I'm Sadie Chung. You're listening to 1680 The Crow. Ramadan is a holy month of fasting, introspection, and prayer for Muslims. It's celebrated as the month during which Muhammad received the initial revelations of the Quran, the holy book for Muslims. Now, today we hope to learn about and highlight 3 areas of discussion: the rules and traditions of Ramadan, how schools and workplaces can accommodate Muslims during the month, and what it's like taking part in Canada versus the Middle East. Ari Azez is the former president of the BCIT Muslim Students Association. He graduated just last year. He's also a regular volunteer with Ask a Muslim Canada, which is a local organization focused on hosting open discussions and distributing free books about Islam. We also have Burnaby Mountain Secondary student Menna Khidir joining us today. Menna is a Muslim student from Syria who immigrated to Canada in 2019. So we'll start with segment 1, the rules and traditions of Ramadan.
Let's start with you, Ari. And first of all, can you also tell us if were you born here or did you grow up, have a different background?
Yeah, actually, I'm from East Vancouver, but I've moved to Surrey with my family about 16 years ago. So aside from a year that I lived in Calgary, which I will never repeat, I'm pretty much a lower mainland boy. But we do visit the Middle East. We're from Kurdistan, which is a region in North Iraq. So we visit every few years in the summer and just reconnect with our roots and kind of visit family and everything, right?
Yeah, lovely.
So how do you celebrate the traditions of Ramadan?
Right, that's a great question. I mean, it's important to note that unlike a lot of holidays that we have here in North America, the month of Ramadan isn't necessarily a celebration. It's actually more of an act of worship, right? And the celebration is a day that we call Eid, which comes at the very end of Ramadan. And it's basically a way to kind of congratulate yourself and everyone around you for completing a month of devotion and obedience to your Creator and spiritual refinement. To answer your question more specifically, the month of Ramadan, it's the ninth month of the Islamic lunar calendar. And in it, Muslims are essentially commanded to, number 1, refrain from food and drink as long as the sun is out, right? So when it's night, we can eat and drink. It's not like we're all month just like starving, right? So we do replenish ourselves at night. And it's not just food and drink like people think. You also have to refrain from intercourse if you are married with your spouse during the daylight hours. And there's also general things that we should refrain from year long, but it's emphasized during Ramadan, which is also, being mindful of your language, the things that you look at, the things that you are doing during the day, the places that you're going to, and just generally how you're spending your time. You are much better off trying to be productive and working on, self-improvement than to just kind of watch Netflix all day and, not leave your bed.
Totally. Yeah, that's beautiful. Did you have anything to add to that, Menna?
My opinion was actually similar to his, because Ramadan is not a celebration necessarily. It's more like a month of worship and forgiveness where you can build your faith in God more, pray, read Quran, which is their holy book. You also fast, not just from drinks and food. You also fast from lying, from saying bad words and etc, etc. So it's not a celebration necessarily. We do celebrate it, but it's not like a celebration. It's more like a month of worship.
Yeah, totally. That's really interesting. And sticking along the lines of fasting, depending on your circumstances, does everyone need to fast, or are there different exceptions?
There are exceptions that are outlined in the Quran, especially in the 2nd chapter called Surah Al-Baqarah. And in particular, children that have not reached the age of puberty, they're exempt. Also, for example, women that are breastfeeding, women that are pregnant, women also that are on their periods, and anyone that is sick or elderly as well. You can see that there's different categories. And the general concept within our religion is, as the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, is that you should not harm others and you shouldn't let harm be done. So we see these exemptions as God's mercy towards all of us as humans. And he knows that, some of us are weak and we can't necessarily finish it, whether because of our age or our health conditions at the time. And so these people are exempt. And if you are from these conditions that are exempt, except for the children, then you're told to just make up the day at a later date in the year if you're able to. And if not, then you should try to at least feed a poor person as expiation.
Wow, that's super interesting.
Nana, what do you think?
Yeah, what he said is correct, but I just want to mention something else. So my friends in school always think that Ramadan actually comes on a specific month, but no, Ramadan doesn't come on a fixed date in the year. It actually comes in a different month every year because I guess it depends on the moon. When the moon becomes like a crescent, I guess, they know that Ramadan should like begin. Yeah, that's what I wanted to mention because my friends get confused a lot. Like, when does it start? Does it like come on a different month every year? And I was like, yeah, I just explained that for them.
Yeah.
That is really cool because in Chinese New Year it's the same way. We go by the lunar calendar, and it's a different date every year. Quite interesting.
That's a good point you raised. Yeah, and the Islamic calendar is also based upon the lunar calendar, and so to be specific, the lunar calendar has only 354 days in the year instead of 365, which the lunar does. So every year we actually shift back 11 days. So a few years ago we were fasting in the summer, and it was kind of hot and about 18 hours every day. But now every year we're shifting closer and closer towards the winter, and it's getting a bit easier.
There you go.
So how do you guys break your fast? You talk about, Ramadan is like the period for Allah. And tell me more about Eid. That is like more like a celebration, right? When everyone comes together and break their fast. What is that like? And can you compare? I don't know if you have ever celebrated, went through Ramadan in the Middle East. Are there any differences between here and abroad? I guess Mena can definitely answer this question. So why don't we start with Mena?
So yeah, it is very different from the Middle East because that Eid is it is a 3-day celebration that comes right after Ramadan, where we break our fasting, and the celebration actually begins by going to the Eid prayers in the morning, and then after the prayers we go to our grandparents' house, greet everyone, and then elders start giving money and treats to like kids. That was my favorite part, to be honest. It's still my favorite. And then it would just be like hang out, travel, go to the amusement park. It is like a fun celebration. It's just like Christmas for Christians. Eid is like Christmas for Muslims. It is that fun for us.
Wow, definitely something to look forward to.
Yeah. And my mom used to do like a specific, tradition that no one else does. So every time in Eid, she used to put a gift under my and my sister pillows. So we would wake up the next day and actually find a gift under our pillows. So
oh, that's cute. Oh, yeah. That is exciting. And does she still do that?
I mean, we got old right now. So
darn it. And what about you, Ari? Do you have any kind of traditions you do yourself?
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing Mina's experiences back home. I think in the Middle East, it's definitely a lot more fun when you have everyone, like literally every single person celebrating with you. Whereas here, you kind of got to take the day off of school or work to go celebrate. But once you get into that crowd, it's definitely a big thing. In general, there are certain so to say, rituals that everyone follows that we have in common that's like based in the religion. So for example, on the day of Eid, you'd wake up and you would take a shower or a bath, and you'd wear like some really clean clothes and put on some nice perfume. And we would start off with a community prayer outdoors typically. And so I live in Surrey, so we used to go to Bear Creek Park every year. And it's a really different environment because it's one thing to pray like in your place of worship, but to now do it outdoors and like the grass and the trees and everyone's around you, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and so after that, that's typically when literally the eating and the drinking begins, because this holiday in specific at the end of Ramadan, it is known as like the holiday of the feast. because you just went like 30 days of like restraining and kind of practicing your self-control. And so now is a chance for everyone to go out and to celebrate. And we have a specific charity that everyone is obligated to pay, regardless if you're young or old, or even for children. And typically, like the father would pay on behalf of their whole family. And this charity goes to all the poor families to ensure that everyone has enough funds to eat and drink during these days, so nobody's left out.
Oh, that's great. And so, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong. I'm hearing about suhoor and that there's different recipes. Can you tell me about that and what exactly that is?
Maybe I'll pass it over to Mina. She probably has more recipes than me.
Yeah, Mina, let us know.
Okay, sure. So for suhoor, we prefer to eat something light so we don't get thirsty or hungry the next day. So I heard that bananas and yogurt actually like reduce thirst and hunger. So what I like to do is like an oatmeal recipe, which I was just oatmeal and bananas, honey, yogurt. That's my favorite for support. It's very light and I don't get thirsty or hungry the next day. So
good thinking, strategic
cool.
planning.
I think that's all we have for the first segment. And now let's move on to the second segment. Ari and Mena. Ari, you're the BCIT Muslim Association ex-president, so you're very involved on campus. And Mena is a high school student. So how can schools and workplaces, like, how can they accommodate Muslim people during Ramadan? I know the BCIT offers a prayer room. Maybe, Ari, can you talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. And it's quite interesting because the way that workplaces and schools could accommodate for Muslims during Ramadan is the same way that they could accommodate throughout the rest of the year, which is, we're fairly low maintenance. And all we really need is that, the same way that a lot of classes offer a 10-minute break for you to go out and grab a coffee or have a smoke. A lot of Muslims usually take that 10-minute break to go out and pray, to just take that moment to reconnect with their creator and take a bit of a break from the world, because there's always a lot going on and it's easy to get distracted. So it's great that, as you mentioned, BCIT has a prayer room just above the student association, and for a lot of other schools or workplaces that don't already have a prayer room, you don't actually need anything special, just a clean place. As the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, the entire earth is a place to worship. So you can be outdoors in the park, you can be, in a closet somewhere in your bedroom. You don't really have like a designated special thing that you need. In fact, when I used to study at Kwantlen University, they had an empty classroom that they just laid down some carpet and they said, here, this is your new prayer room. And we've been using that for years now. So yeah, just being mindful of, the fact that as Muslims, we do have prayer times throughout the day. They're evenly spaced out, and typically throughout the day, it's only once in the summer that we would have to take a break, and in the winter, because the days are much shorter, usually about twice. So just be mindful of the prayer times. Understand if your student comes 10 minutes late to class or to work, especially on Fridays, because on Fridays we have a community prayer that is obligatory upon every Muslim male. And number one, being mindful of the time, and number two, if you don't already have a space, try and accommodate and come up with a prayer place.
Yeah, totally. And Mena, on that note, like, as we said, you're in high school. So do you feel like accommodated there? You might participate in PE or any kind of physical things. And I can imagine that taking a toll on you, especially when you're fasting. So are there ways that they can accommodate that? Are there expectations, or should there be?
Yeah, as you said, PE class is a real issue. I don't know if you guys know, but PE class from grade 8 to 10 is mandatory in high school. So last year, I had PE class every day while I was fasting, and we used to do all that hard work, when I was fasting. So I used to go back home almost dead. So I think schools should make like PE classes optionals for Muslims during Ramadan. I also think that, so let me tell you, last year also, I went on a hike with my teacher, like with my class, okay? And then the teacher started offering us Timbits. I don't know if you guys know Timbits.
Yeah.
And I actually thanked him. Like I said, I don't eat right now because I'm fasting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know if he was like, he understood me. But then like a few minutes later, he came back again and offered me Timbits again. I don't know if he did that on purpose. I'm not sure, but that wasn't nice of him.
Yeah.
To be honest, he offered me Timbits like 3 times, and I told him that I'm fasting. So I don't know if that was on purpose. I'm assuming it's not, to be honest. But like, just avoid offering food for Muslim students. That's also another thing.
It's like they're tempting you almost, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to play something now, and just for our viewers, just because I know for me, I've never heard of this, and I'm sure a lot of other people haven't. I'm going to play the azan, which is the Muslim call to prayer, as I'm sure you know. Is that okay with you?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
So yeah, that is super beautiful. And when you're at school, when you're from work, like how do you get a reminder that it's time to prayer?
I actually have an app for that.
Ooh.
I set this app where like I'm staying, but like let's say I'm staying now in Burnaby. I set this app that I'm staying in Burnaby, and then every time like how do I say it? But it just like the azan comes up.
Yeah, and it alerts you. That's super cool that they make apps like that. And do you use kind of the same, Ari, or is there a different way that you go by?
I think pretty much everyone uses the app now. In the Muslim countries, they actually do the call to prayer live because there's so many mosques all around the city, and they also have permits with the government to use the mega speakers and make sure that the noise gets heard. Being here, you can't really have that same permit, so yeah, we have our push notifications on our app, and if you have your location services turned on, even if you're traveling, it basically calculates like when the sun is going to rise or when it's going to set, and it'll just give you a little notification. You can choose to actually set so that your notification gives you like a pre-recorded adhan.
Okay.
Or you can just have it like a silent one. I'm at work, I don't want to like freak out my coworkers, so I just have the silent one on. My mom keeps it on loud, so she'll be in Walmart and it'll just go off. So
I love it.
Has their own preferences.
I love it. Well, I think we should move on to our last segment, and that is just about what it's like taking part in Ramadan in Canada versus the Middle East. So, Mena, maybe you can talk about what the difference was for you having Ramadan in Syria and what's it like now in Canada.
Yeah, it is really different. So back there, we used to all gather to eat what we call iftar together, like as a family, and then like watch series together, pray together. It used to be much more fun, to be honest. Also, like back in Egypt, I used to, when I want to break my fasting and eat iftar, I used to like hear azan from the mosque itself, not just from the app, not just like an app notification. So it is really different. It's much more fun in the Middle East. And also, but back there, before Ramadan comes, neighbors, like all neighbors, decorate the neighborhood, their houses. So it feels fun, like just going into a neighborhood that is full of decorations, and it feels fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can all relate. And then I think just a final question for both of you.
Both of you, this might be a little bit deeper. So do you think Canada needs to adapt a little bit more to Muslim traditions, especially on Canadian soil? What do you guys think?
Being here in Canada is definitely a big blessing. Religious freedom is something that we all get to benefit from and enjoy. We're all free to, dress the way that we want, to worship the way that we want. And it's not necessarily something that you have to do in private. Like, we have the ability to come here, even like on this podcast, and we can talk freely about our beliefs and share our thoughts with one another. So overall, like, I think Canada is definitely doing a great job.
Good. Well, that's all the time we have.
Sorry. Yeah,
Thank you
that's all the
so much for,
joining
sharing.
us and educating the public. I feel like we learned a lot, but once this podcast is published, people are going to learn a lot more.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. So once again, thank you both.
Awesome. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I'm Sadie Chung.
And I'm Tiger Ann.
You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Ramadan Mubarak.
Hello, loyal listeners, and welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, Hollywood North. Every week, me and my co-host Alicia dig into a different topic that's happening in Vancouver's ever-growing film and TV industry.
You know how it goes. We bring the stories, guests, and entertainment, so all you have to do is sit back and listen. Here we go. Lights, camera, action.
This week on Hollywood North, we take a look at safety in the film industry and the most infamous accidents to happen in Vancouver. As always, we've interviewed two experts on the topic to give us their inside opinion.
Today we have Daniel Leverly from WorkSafe BC and Emerson Wong, an experienced stunt person from the industry with us. They both share their expertise on how accidents are still happening today and talk about how even the most traumatic accidents could have been prevented.
It was really interesting to hear an experienced stunt person say that most of these serious accidents that happened could all have been avoided. To know that prevention of future casualties and injuries is completely possible, it just really shows that more safety and responsibility needs to be taken on these sets.
Oh yeah, I mean, I love the film industry in Vancouver. I think such amazing content gets made and brings joy to so many people, and just thinking about all the jobs created from it and what that adds to our economy, not to mention the celebrities. Who doesn't love to see Ryan Reynolds walking around?
Oh, absolutely. You know I never turned down the chance to look at Ryan Reynolds. But that's what brings us to the focus of today's episode, the other side of the entertainment industry and the danger that comes with working on sets. Just Vancouver itself has an infamous history of accidents, injuries, and fatalities happening on sets. Speaking of Ryan Reynolds, one of the most tragic accidents to happen in Vancouver was the fatality of a stunt person on the set of Deadpool 2.
Yeah, that was so horrible to hear about when it happened. It was professional motorcycle racer Joy Harris, who passed away after losing control of her motorcycle during a stunt. I know from speaking to our guest today that there's so much more that happens in an accident than just the one person involved.
Our first guest today, Emerson Wong, was actually a stunt person on the set of Deadpool 2, where that accident happened. Emerson has been in the stunt industry since 2006 and has worked on over 45 projects, including DC's Legends of Tomorrow, American Gods, Titans, and of course, Deadpool 2. Here he is speaking about why accidents happen on film sets and what goes into coordinating a stunt safely.
Certainly, safety has been increased over time. As you know, there have been some serious incidents that have happened in the past, and a lot of those things could have been avoided. And I think that the most recent one was the one that was happening on the show Rust, right? And with gun firing, an actual live round, things like that shouldn't have happened. And there are already policies in place where things like that shouldn't have happened, and because of hiring the wrong person, or and even the same thing that happened on Deadpool is just when you let things sort of slide and kind of push the envelope a little bit and try to save some money, or that's usually when things start to fall apart, and why these things, one safety measure gets kind of overlooked and another safety measure overlooked, and a combination of things put together is why these things happen. So they're there, but then because these things still slip up sometimes, then new policies get put in place, or maybe there's some penalty that we put in place, fines and that sort of stuff, which happens. The producers get sued, and someone is responsible for why that happened. So certainly, as more of these incidents happen, more rules get put in place. They're supposed to prevent them, but of course, when there is the ability for something to slide, it does certainly happen from time to time. So usually, when it comes to stunts, the coordinator would go over and have a meeting with the rest of production before that stunt kind of comes to play. They would call a safety meeting, and usually they would say what is about to happen for that day, and all the different departments come together, whether it's props or it's your medics, your lighting. All the crew comes together to say, okay, well, we're gonna have some explosion happening, so make sure that you guys are this far away. Make sure that when we're doing sort of a fire burn over here, make sure you don't use these kind of chemicals around this area because it could catch fire when this goes off, kind of thing. So all the departments kind of come together, and the stunt coordinator would advise those other departments to make sure that nothing bad would happen at that time. But on the day, there would be that meeting to discuss and go over again those precautions, and the stunt players in the scene would also be briefed on making sure they're comfortable with what is about to happen.
It's so sad that so many accidents and fatalities happen on these sets. No matter what the accident is, it creates such a ripple effect that touches so many different people. The family and friends of the victims, the staff on the production sets, everyone involved in the situation, really.
Especially when our guests explain that prevention is completely possible at the end of the day. Thankfully, it's WorkSafe's job to go in and put the blame on the appropriate parties when these things happen. But nothing can turn back time, and I believe it's important for responsibility and accountability to be held.
Well, look what happened in that accident on Deadpool 2. Joy Harris, the motorcycle racer that died, wasn't an experienced stunt person. The person who was supposed to perform the stunt originally wasn't available, so they brought Harris in to do it just a few days before the stunt was shot. She was just a professional driver, and Deadpool 2 was actually the first movie she'd ever worked on.
Only one word comes to mind there: prevention. I know WorkSafe definitely found a lot of problems in their investigation of that set. Their report actually said that the accident was the result of multiple safety failures. The Vancouver production company TCF ended up being fined almost $300,000 for the high-risk safety violations that WorkSafe found.
Yikes, I can't imagine anybody wanting to be fined that amount of money, not to mention causing a death or any type of accident. Emerson talked with us about the accident that just happened on the set of the movie Rust, where a person lost their life after being shot by a prop gun. What did you think about that?
I thought it was really interesting to hear him go into such detail about the step-by-step process of what should have gone into the safety of that stunt. He also brought up the personal responsibility of the stunt player performing the stunt, which I found really important to hear.
Why don't we play that clip for our listeners?
Usually stunt players are trained to know that when there is a gun handed to them, to make sure to check to make sure that it is empty. And what happened on Rust, for example, was that the armorer was supposed to make sure that there's no live round in there. No matter how many times you put it somewhere, if you don't look at it and you come back to it, you're supposed to check it again. But of course, sometimes you put it down, you look away, come back, and after a few minutes, it should still be empty. But I mean, this is one of the things supposed to check, is like always check, double check, triple check, because something could happen, right? But that's the first part. And the second part is when the AD comes by and takes the gun from the armorer and passes it to the talent. They're supposed to have checked it too, even though the armorer tells them that the gun is cold, there's nothing in there. The AD shouldn't assume that, right? And then if a stunt player takes the gun, they're supposed to also be told and shown by the person or the armorer passes them is that it is empty. Look, it is empty. The chamber is empty. There's so many checks and balances there, and that's why that none of that should have happened. But because one person assumed, the next person assumed, the next person assumed, and of course on the set it's very busy. Things happen all the time, and it's under a lot of pressure. But it's when things are under pressure is when things go wrong, right? Because you start skipping all these things.
With such an experienced stunt person telling us how accidents happen, and more importantly, how they could be prevented, I had to know what the numbers actually look like. So you know what that means. It's time for everyone's favorite segment, the Saracen Statistic Corner.
Get that popcorn poppin', it's Saracen Statistic Corner.
An article published by CBC in 2018 states the film and entertainment industry had more than 100 serious injury claims and more than 600 time loss claims made to WorkSafe BC in 2017. That's the same year that the accident on Deadpool 2 happened. Our second guest today, Daniel Leverly, works for WorkSafe BC as a supervisor of interest for the film team, a team of 14 inspectors that look after all the incidents within the BC film industry. Here he is sharing the amount of injuries reported in 2020, as well as the major claim drivers in the entertainment industry over the past 5 years.
There were 424 lost time claims in the motion picture and television production CU. And so what that would mean is there were 442 workers that were injured to a severity where they lost some time of work, meaning they couldn't go back the next day. Of those 424 lost time injuries, 74 of those were serious injuries, meaning that the workers that endured those serious injuries they suffered in the sense that they're either off for a very long time due to a muscle related, like an MSI related injury, or they were injured to a severity where a major bone was broken or something of that sort. So yeah, 424 lost time injuries, and 74 of those were serious injuries in 2020. So over the last 5 years, incidents involving falls, and that's to the same level, so a slip, trip, or fall, or from elevations. Those are the major drivers. They accounted for almost $17 million in claims costs, which is about 30% of the industry's claims costs. And it also resulted in about 60,000 lost days of work. So those are good workers in BC that ended up missing days at work due to their injury. So falls from heights and from the same elevation is the major driver of incidents in this industry.
The biggest thing I took away from our two guests today is that safety should always be the first priority on any set, no matter the cost to the production companies. Even though they're from two different sides of the issue, both Emerson and Daniel agree that prevention is the major key to stopping serious accidents like these from happening in the future. The thing to remember is that safety is the responsibility of everyone on set. Teamwork is very important. If all the different teams on a production come together and work together, make safety the top priority, and make sure nothing slips through the cracks, we would have much less accidents happening. Here's Daniel from WorkSafe again, talking about how production companies can help prevent future accidents and what goes into a proper risk assessment.
My perspective of all accidents are preventable, and that's done through a proper risk assessment. So if we're able to identify the hazards, and then we conduct what we call a risk assessment to develop the appropriate controls to provide safety to the workers on these sets, that is really the best way to prevent incidents. It's a process that safety professionals utilize, and it can be applied in any industry under any circumstances. But really, it's about identifying the hazards. Once you have identified those hazards, then conducting a risk assessment to see what type of control measures or what things could you put into place to further reduce the significance of an injury or to reduce the likelihood of an injury. So managing risk, the best way to prevent these incidents within industry is to have qualified people conduct risk assessments, which lead to the development of controls which need to be implemented. And that includes the supervision to ensure that those controls are being used, and the training to ensure that workers understand the controls and hazards at the work site.
You all know how much of a movie and TV fanatic I am, and how much of the content that I love has come out of Vancouver. Knowing that these actors and workers put their life in danger every day on set is really humbling and gives me such a sense of gratitude that they put their lives at risk every day just to create.
I couldn't imagine going to work every day doing stunts or feeling unsafe and never knowing what might happen. Even thinking of the trauma from just witnessing an accident happen, it could affect someone for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. So everyone, please, next time you're watching a movie or your favorite show, just remember the danger that they put themselves in to bring you that content. Well, Alicia, I think we've done it again and have come to the end.
Thank you to both of our guests for their time and all their invaluable expertise. Why don't we end with one last clip from Daniel giving thanks to all the workers in the entertainment industry.
The film industry is different than a lot of different workplaces in BC in the way that they're structured. And so they're just a wonderful group of workers in BC that produce and assist productions in producing kind of those those forms of entertainment we need worldwide, really. I mean, like, BC is the third largest hub in North America for film production. And so we have a big infrastructure in BC that includes thousands of workers that facilitate that. And when you stand back and look at that, there's a lot of great workers who are exposed to risks at the workplace to allow us to have that form of entertainment. So to be honest, I just really want to thank all the workers out there that provide that form of entertainment and do such quality work out there. They're all very dedicated, artistic people, and there's a lot of challenging risks to deal with in the industry.
As always, a huge thank you to all our listeners out there. Hopefully we've brought you the information and entertainment you need and love once again. This is Riley Serzin, signing off from your favorite podcast, Hollywood North.
And this has been Alicia Blancard. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretanero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon, I'm McKenna O'Neill with your 1 o'clock news update. A structure fire has broken out in a building in Gastown near Abbott and Water Street. Smoke is filling up the neighborhood and police are urging motorists to stay out of the area. Firefighters are on scene fighting the blaze. Fire Chief Karen Fry tweeted that several people have been rescued from the building. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke on electric vehicles and cutting greenhouse gas emissions while visiting in Victoria. This comes after the latest federal budget that highlighted transitioning to a greener economy and expanding the availability of zero-emissions vehicles and charging stations.
We'll be supporting the development of EV supply chains in Canada, which will create more jobs, will create a growing economy, and again, allow people to be able to afford electric vehicles even quicker. So it's a comprehensive approach that is about going to where we know Canadians want to be in the coming years.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is in Burnaby today speaking with Metrotown Hilton hotel workers on strike. A BC scientist is calling for better public access to COVID-19 databases as the province enters a potential sixth wave of the pandemic. In the latest report, the independent BC COVID-19 modeling group says it believes BC is at the beginning of a second Omicron wave. Joseph Williams, president of the BC Mink Producers Association, says the Supreme Court's decision to not let mink farmers breed this year has ruined generations of work. The Agriculture Ministry announced in November that live mink would not be permitted on farms by April of 2023. The plan being that the industry would be phased out 2 years later, citing concerns of farms becoming a breeding ground for COVID-19 infections. Mink farmers filed a judicial report in response, and Williams says they understand the public health concerns but do not agree with the decision to eliminate the industry. U.S. President Joe Biden is urging one of America's closest allies to take a harder line against Russia's Ukraine invasion. Sajar Meghani with the Associated Press has more.
India says it's appealing for peace between Moscow and Kyiv.
The situation in Ukraine is very worrying.
But as he spoke virtually with President Biden through an interpreter, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi remains under pressure to put pressure himself on Russia. India has stayed neutral, raising concerns here at the White House and drawing praise from Moscow. In trying to persuade Modi to do more, the president citing a deep connection between Americans and Indians.
Ties of family, of friendship, and of shared values.
Earlier at the Pentagon, Defense Chief Lloyd Austin gave the same message to his counterpart, saying Indian leadership is vital to keeping world order.
So too is a U.S.-India defense partnership and our collaboration with like-minded partners.
Sagar Meghani at the White House.
Prince Charles and his wife Camilla are going to make a 3-day trip to Canada next month. Don Kelly with the Canadian Press has more.
Clarence House and Governor General Mary Simon's office say the royal couple will travel to Newfoundland and Labrador, the Northwest Territories, and the Ottawa region. A detailed itinerary is expected soon. This is going to be the 19th visit to Canada for the Prince of Wales and the 5th for the Duchess of Cornwall. Charles and Camilla were last here in the summer of 2017 when they traveled to Iqaluit, Ottawa, Trenton, and Wellington in Ontario, and Gatineau, Quebec. Don Kelly, the Canadian Press.
Jury selection is beginning in the $50 million libel lawsuit by Johnny Depp against his ex-wife, Amber Heard. Reporter Julie Walker with the Associated Press has more.
Depp is suing Heard for a 2018 Washington Post op-ed the actress wrote, in which she discussed domestic violence but didn't name her ex-husband. Heard's lawyers argue she deserves protection from libel because the article dealt with a matter of public interest. Depp's lawyers say it falsely implies she was abused by him, the accusations are untrue, and have made it difficult for him to get work. Both are in court and scheduled to testify along with numerous other Hollywood stars. Depp was allowed to sue in Virginia because the paper's online editions are published through servers there. I'm Julie Walker.
The Montreal Canadiens are facing off against the Winnipeg Jets tonight. This will be the second game the Canadiens will have played against the Jets, with the Jets winning the previous game. The Toronto Blue Jays start their first road trip of the season tonight against the New York Yankees in a 4-game series. Toronto won their first series of the season, taking 2 of 3 games against the Texas Rangers at Rogers Center. The Yankees also won their first series of 2022, taking 2 of 3 games from the visiting Boston Red Sox. On today's weather, we can expect partly cloudy skies from 12 to 3, today's highs of 13 degrees with a low of -1 with high winds. This has been your 1 o'clock update. I'm McKenna O'Neill, and you're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.